Hi, and welcome to The Human Factor, the LinkedIn Live of Inc. and Fast Company. I'm Eric Schurenberg, the CEO of Inc. and Fast Company. A recurring topic on The Human Factor is the leader's journey from merely a brilliant person or merely an innovative founder or merely a subject matter expert to a leader who can galvanize an organization behind a vision. Today's guest, Rana el Kaliouby, who is all of those things, has made that journey and others, which is why she is such a fascinating interview. Now, just to give you a flavor, let's focus on three journeys. Journey one is from a self-described nice Egyptian girl growing up traditional in Kuwait and Egypt, and yet making the leap to a computer science PhD at Cambridge University and research scientist at MIT's famed Media Lab, where she and her partner, Roz Picard, pioneered the intriguing field of emotion AI, which combines emotional recognition and artificial intelligence. Journey two is from scientist to co-founder of Affectiva and thought leader, TED speaker, media star, and entrepreneur. Journey three takes place within Affectiva and arguably within Rana's own heart as she grows from co-founder to CEO and leader, a journey that I've watched admiringly from a distance for several years. Rana's remarkable journey is wonderfully told, I should add, in her book, Girl Decoded. So without further ado, welcome, Rana el Kaliouby.
Hi, Eric. Thank you for having me. It's a true pleasure. You've been a mentor and supporter and friend of mine, and it's a true pleasure to be here today.
Rana, the honor is all mine. So glad that you're here. This is going to be so much fun. Now, I get the impression that Cambridge University and MIT Media Labs are not exactly crawling with nice Egyptian girls who grew up in traditional households. What about your upbringing made you able to make that part of your journey?
I have to give credit to my parents. Both my parents are technologists. In fact, they met when my dad taught a COBOL programming class. COBOL, of course, is an extinct programming language at this point. And my mom in the 70s signed up to take his class. So she must have been one of the early, really trailblazers in technology for women in the Middle East. So I grew up surrounded by technology. Also, my parents are really huge believers in education and being lifelong learners and being intellectually curious human beings. So we traveled a lot as kids. And so I've always been fascinated by other cultures and very open-minded and not fearful of others. So I really think that kind of boldness and courage, but also like the generosity and the value of human connection, which is very key to being Egyptian and Middle Eastern, is also really part of who I am, and was the ammo to which I, leaned on to embark on these journeys.
For all your travel and your family's intellectual curiosity, I would still imagine that Cambridge University was kind of a culture shock, was it?
It was. I also started my PhD like a few weeks after September 11th happened. And at the time, I'm Muslim, but at the time I used to wear the hijab. So I was very, very visibly Muslim. And my parents were fearful for my safety. And a lot of my family were against me going to Cambridge. So it was my first experience being abroad and away from my family. I was struck again by, Cambridge in particular is like Cambridge, Massachusetts is is a learning town, right? A lot of scholars and a lot of intellectually curious people. So I had that in common, but I was a minority. I was a minority as a female PhD student. I was also minority in terms of, where I came from and how I looked. I always use my smile as a I come in peace, people, and I think that helped a lot.
Yeah. Well, it works. Now, Cambridge is where you met Roz Picard, your co-founder at Affectiva, who's a real influence on your life. How did that happen?
So Roz Picard is an MIT professor. She wrote the book Affective Computing, which posited that machines need to have emotional intelligence. I read the book in 1998 when I was still in Egypt. And I was just very inspired by her work. And in 2004, very serendipitously, she was visiting Cambridge to give a keynote, and I, signed up to meet with her in person. And that meeting, I can say, just changed the trajectory of my life, right? She invited me to join her as a postdoc at MIT. We both discovered that we shared this common mission of applying our technology to help people. So the very first application we explored was helping autistic kids read and understand nonverbal communication. So I would say it was a very serendipitous meeting, but it was also this meeting of the minds.
After Cambridge, you went back to Cairo. You became a teacher at the American University in Cairo. And speaking of moments that change your life, you there got a call from Nicholas Negroponte, the founder of MIT Media Lab. What was that call like?
This was after I graduated, completed my PhD. I went back to Cairo to teach at the American University in Cairo. As an aside, that was always my career plan. Like, I was fixated on becoming faculty. Hence, going abroad, getting a PhD, and then going back to Egypt. I had met Roz at the time, and she was really excited to bring me to the Media Lab as a postdoc. And yeah, out of the blue, I got a call from Nicholas, and he said, hello, I'm Nicholas Negroponte, and I have an offer for you to join MIT as a postdoc. And it was a dream come true. But at the time, I was married, and I had my daughter, who was a toddler at the time. And I was clear that there was no way I was going to move to the United States full time. And so Roz and Nicholas said, it's okay, just commute from Cairo. And I started literally a 3-year commute between Boston and Cairo, which was, I wouldn't recommend it. It was tough.
How did your family feel about your going to the US?
I would say they were excited. Again, like my family are supporters of my education, and generally speaking, supporters of my career. There was a little bit of tension in that it was becoming clear that my husband at the time was not going to be moving. I mean, he didn't move with me to Cambridge because he ran a software company back in Cairo, and he was not going to move with me to Boston. So at this point, we were 6 or 7 years into our marriage, 5 of which was a long distance relationship. So both our parents were starting to flag that as a concern. And the expectation, honestly, was that I would just give up all of that and just come back to Cairo and be a nice Egyptian wife and daughter and mom. And, but I couldn't. I'm just too passionate about all of this to easily give up on it.
That must have been a tough call. Or was it just the path so clear for you that it wasn't so tough? Which wasn't?
No, it was definitely a tough call, but I have to give my ex credit because he really supported me on this journey. And he said, this is your calling, something you're passionate about. I don't want to stand in your way. I guess I underestimated how much it would hurt our relationship. I just thought we would power through it. And, we're both pioneers in our own industries. And I didn't realize how much this kind of long distance, not being able to connect, right? It's ironic because that's what I do on a day-to-day basis. I try to teach machines emotional intelligence. And in a way, this lack of human connection hurt my relationship.
Yeah. There's an irony there. There's a saying that we teach what we need to learn. Although, Rana, you are a very high EQ person. We'll get to that.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of culture shock at Cambridge, England, in your book, you talk about kind of repeated culture shocks landing in America. Tell us about some of those.
I think the biggest one, which I don't know if this is US as a whole or just specifically MIT, because I was doing this commute between Cairo and Boston, and it struck me that at the Media Lab at MIT, we were all about innovation, creativity, breaking the rules, failing. It was okay to fail. it was the first time in my life actually that I kind of experienced this openness to failure. And then I hop on a flight back to Cairo, and it was the exact opposite, where you don't want to be a rebel. You don't really want to kind of break from the crowds. You got penalized if you failed. So that was one thing that struck me. That I think it's starting to change, this openness to startups and innovation. But it wasn't the case back then. The other thing, which I talk about in the book too, Roz, my co-founder and basically my sponsor at MIT, she would invite me into her house on Fridays for dinner. And it was the first time. So we'd have dinner. Sometimes her husband would cook, which, I'd never seen it or heard any of that. And we would—
A man cooking.
Yeah, a man cooking. And then we would clear up the table, and I would attempt to load the dishwasher, and her husband would say, no, that's my job. And I was like, what do you mean it's your job? And he's like, I like to load the dishwasher. It's my job. That too, this kind of sharing of responsibility between partners and kind of very different gender stereotypes and roles. So that was a cultural shock for sure.
The first application for software that you and Roz put together, as you mentioned, was helping people on the autism spectrum. How did that technology work?
So the idea is 90% of how we communicate is nonverbal. It's split between our facial expressions, our hand gestures, our body posture, and our vocal intonation. When we communicate digitally, a lot of that disappears in cyberspace. So we use computer vision and machine learning and deep learning and gobs of data to train these algorithms. And essentially what we did for our autism project was we packaged that all up in a Google Glass looking device. This was way before Google Glass existed. We literally hacked a pair of glasses with a little spy camera on, because that's the smallest camera we could find. And it analyzed the expressions of the people you were interacting with. And so the kids on the autism spectrum got real-time feedback on their nonverbal communication. And it encouraged the kids to make face contact and eye contact. And it also helped them learn about these signals and how to read emotions in real time. And so we were starting to see a lot of these kids improve in terms of their nonverbal communication, which was very exciting.
Oh, that's fascinating. And now Affectiva has other products in facial recognition and even voice recognition. What are some of what would you say is the biggest moneymaker or the most widely used product that the company puts out?
So the company, we launched this product in 2011, so 10 years ago, where our technology is used by 28% of the Fortune Global 500 companies to get a sense of how consumers respond to content. So if you're in the business of creating video ads or content of any type, you want to really understand the emotional connection your audience has with this content. Did they like it? Did they find it funny? Was it offensive? Was it persuasive? And typically you just ask people at the end of a video, okay, did you like it? Did it resonate? Well, now we're able to, moment by moment, with people's permission, of course, capture their emotional reactions. We aggregate all of that data anonymously, and then we're able to tell you, yeah, this is exactly where people found the joke funny or not, or this is where they were sentimental. So it's really key insights that drives, we know that your emotions drive behavior. They drive brand loyalty, brand perception, purchase intent. So now we can capture that as people, respond to this, to branded content. And the companies make a lot of decisions based on it, including media spend. How many millions of dollars do you spend behind a piece of content?
It's fascinating. So merely from reading the expressions of the subjects, the algorithm can infer emotions like sentiment,
yes.
Sentimentality. That's amazing.
how positive or negative you're feeling towards the content.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, in the last couple of years, I wouldn't call it a pivot, but we've really hunkered down on applying the technology in the automotive industry. Everything from understanding driver drowsiness and distraction and driver road rage, right, to understanding what else is happening with the occupants in the vehicle, like how many people are in the vehicle, how are they responding, can you personalize the mobility experience to make it more comfortable and more enjoyable. So we partner with a lot of the global automakers to, we're not yet on the roads, we're not integrated yet into any car you can buy today, but we're kind of testing the technology.
So that's fascinating. So you'll get an alert when this is installed that you're falling asleep, or that your emotions may be rising and you should sort of tamp down the road rage. Is that the idea?
That's the idea, exactly. Think of it as the eyes and ears of the car kind of having your back.
I love it. Yeah, slow down, cowboy. Affectiva has an annual conference, hosts a conference on emotion AI and on ethics and AI too. And a pioneer company like Affectiva can really see sort of the benefits and also the scary aspects of artificial intelligence. When you look out at the future of AI, does anything particularly worry you? Are there misuses that you would want society to be alert to?
Yeah, I want to start by commenting on the summit because, of course, you play a key role in our summit, and you've been very generous with your time. You're what do you call it? Like a main feature of our summit. We've had it for 3 or 4 years. Of course, we canceled it last year because of COVID, and this year TBD. But it was our way of essentially saying, okay, this is an emerging tech category, emotion AI or artificial emotional intelligence. There are a lot of applications of it. Some of it are really amazing and transformative for society, but some of it are concerning. And we wanted to convene the thought leaders and the business professionals who are at the forefront of this emerging tech category, and make sure that we are all aligned and that we are pushing the agenda forward, especially as it relates to ethics. I do worry about this technology. There are, of course, ways with which, if you do not respect people's privacy, you can use it to discriminate against people, for surveillance purposes or for lie detection. So these are all areas that we as a company have made a decision very early on to stay away from. But we now also proactively encourage the rest of the industry to also, scrutinize the applications of the technology in these areas, because you don't have an opportunity to consent. You don't have an opportunity to know who's in control of your data or how it's being used, and I think that's not okay.
Are there particular applications that concern you? Facial recognition in police surveillance, for example?
Yeah, exactly. Surveillance, security, lie detection are all areas that we stay away from, and we've turned potentially millions of dollars of equity funding, but also revenue for the company because they're in these areas. And one of our core values is consent and privacy, and we just take a very strong stance. And I believe that's important. Like, I see myself as a tech leader, not just as a CEO of a startup that's leading this space, but almost like a steward of this technology. And I want to set a high bar for the industry, even if it means we make less money as a company.
That's the dark side. There's also an incredibly promising side. I remember at one of your conferences hearing about a company called, I believe, Beyond Verbal, which used technology that could detect early warning signs of coronary artery disease from changes in voice patterns. What gets you most excited about the uses of human interaction with AI?
I am very passionate about the application of the technology to mental health. And it's actually an area that the company's not focused on, but I think there's tremendous opportunity. So we know that there are facial and vocal biomarkers of things like stress, anxiety, depression, even suicidal intent. And given the fact that we are spending hours and hours in front of our devices every day, to me, it's an opportunity for us to capture your baseline and be able to track if you deviate from it, so we can flag or look for early signs of depression or anxiety, and be able to get you help and support. Again, with your permission. Like, I think it's important to design this in a way that doesn't breach people's privacy. So that's an area where I believe there's a lot of potential for good. Because today the gold standard in mental health is you literally walk into your doctor's office and they ask you, "Ooh, from a scale from 1 to 10, Eric, how depressed are you? How stressed are you?" We can do better. We can do better.
I want to talk about what I refer to in the intro as journey number 3, is your journey to be CEO of a company with 100 employees. When the job was first offered to you, you turned it down. How come?
So when we started Affectiva, Roz, my co-founder, she's a tenured MIT professor, so she never left MIT. And I was the CTO. We hired, with the nudging of our early investors, a seasoned business executive to run the company. So he was the CEO until 2013, when he decided to move on. And the question became, who's going to be the next CEO? And a few of our board members said, well, Rana should be. It's her baby. It's her technology. And I remember going back home and thinking, gosh, I've never been CEO before. I do not want to fail. And so I literally woke up the next day and told them, you know what? I'm not going to take the job. At the same time, our head of sales, who had also never been CEO before, and in fact had only been with the company for a year, he said, I'll take the job. And he became CEO until, between 2013 to 2015, when I had this kind of moment of awakening, if you like. I was flying back from TED after giving my talk, and I don't know, I was curious. I was like, what's the actual job description of a CEO? And so I Googled it and I started building a list. And as I was literally typing it out, I was like, wow, I'm already doing the job. I had raised, to date, we've raised $50 million of funding. I was the evangelist in the face of the tech category. I was very involved in the product development and the go-to-market. And I was like, I'm doing the job, I just don't have the title. And all it took is for me to convince myself first. And once I had made that mind shift, I went to our CEO at the time, convinced him, after obviously a lot of going back and forth. And then we took it to the board and it was a unanimous vote. And that was just over 5 years ago. 2016, I stepped into the CEO role. And I tell people I was my own biggest obstacle.
Wow. And even though you had Googled what a CEO does, I would guess that there were surprises, that there were, just say, judging from my own experience as a CEO, that there are myths about leadership that had to be overcome before you could be effective. Did you encounter any of those? Any myths that got in your way?
I know you and I have a lot of these conversations around leadership. I think what I've now embraced, but I maybe didn't embrace as much and own as much when I first stepped into the role, is the role that empathy plays, right? And the role that being vulnerable plays. And I think that's become really imminent in the last year as we've all had to navigate the challenges of the pandemic. But I really believe in empathetic leadership. I tell people, by being an empathetic leader, it doesn't mean I'm a weak leader. I still make the tough decisions, but I make them with empathy and compassion. And so I've really kind of totally embraced and now own this form of leadership where you lead with empathy. You really you're vulnerable. You share about your own personal experiences because it almost gives people permission to reciprocate. It builds camaraderie and loyalty. And then you pair that with clear and transparent decision making. So I want to throw that question back at you, Eric, because I know you and I mean, I admire you as a leader, and I really do believe you bring that element of empathy in how you.
Well, I try, but I would say that I struggle with an enduring myth about leadership that many CEOs kind of have a hard time discarding, is the idea that the leader is supposed to be some kind of superhero, the person who has all the answers, who rides into the room on a white horse and solves everyone's problem. That never works, and it stresses everybody out, including the CEO, and yet it's kind of an enduring idea, at least one that I sort of have to remind myself to leave at the door when I come into the office.
I would agree with that. I mean, I have an incredible, and you know a few of them, an incredible executive team who have way more experience than I do. I mean, this is my first and only company, right? And a lot of my executive team have been parts of startups, but also large organizations. They've run bigger teams, right? And I'm just so grateful that together we complement each other, and they can bring a lot more wisdom and experience to the table. And I think that's great. I don't have to have all the answers. I just have to work with awesome people who do.
Yes, that is the beginning of wisdom in leadership. I think, one of the previous guests on The Human Factor used this phrase, which I've taken to heart, which is, my success is built on the agency of others. I think that's a good thing to remember. Or as my mentor, Alan Mulally of Ford would say, it's not about you, it's about them.
Right, love that.
Was there, well, we've covered that. I want to ask a question about the people you've looked up to in your life. Roz Picard obviously was a key mentor. Was there someone else, not in your family, but who's, and a person you maybe knew in reality or didn't, that was an icon or a model for you?
The person that comes to mind is Andy Palmer. He is a serial entrepreneur, very supportive of the Boston startup ecosystem, and he's now the founder and CEO of a company called Tamer. He was the very first advisor we brought on at Affectiva, and he's just continued to be an incredible mentor, and he's just so grounded and you know, and has this big picture. He's strategic, right? Like he's not about like the day-to-day or the year-to-year even. He has this long-term view on what it means to have impact. And he's just been an incredible supporter of mine and role model of mine. So I do want to give him a shout out. And it comes back to this, you know, I'm very passionate about bringing more diverse voices to technology and to the tech industry. But I think the role that male allies play is amazing, and Andy is just phenomenal. He mentors and sponsors a lot of female founders in the Boston area, and so I feel special, but I know he gives that. He's generous with his time to a lot of other female founders, and I think that's great. We need more Andys in the world, and Eric too. No, you do the same.
Shout out to Andy Palmer. That's great. Last question, Rana. In your book, you have a fetching passage about, you know, somewhere you say, I'm not quoting this exactly, there's an alternate universe in which the nice Egyptian girl gets her PhD at Cambridge, goes back to American University at Cairo, and becomes a teacher and lives an ordinary life in Cairo. That's not the journey that you went on. Why do you think, if you kind of look back on the arc of your life, that you ended up not following that life that was your intention at one point, and instead pursuing the course that led you here?
I think the short answer, and we don't talk about that a lot, it's okay to outgrow your dreams. And I think at some point when I went to Cambridge, my eyes opened up to this new universe and this kind of the art of the possible that I didn't know existed. And so I outgrew my initial dream, and that's okay. It's okay. But also I think at the heart of it is this deep conviction I have that the technology that we're building will transform not only how we interact with our machines, but ultimately how we connect and communicate with one another in a digital world. And I want to be a part of it.
That's fantastic. Rana el Kaliouby, thank you so much. And what I'm going to take away is that it's okay to outgrow your dreams. That is a fabulous thought for the day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's a true honor.
And to all of you who are watching, thank you for watching. This has been The Human Factor. I'm Eric Schurenberg.